Good morning. Hello, this is Yarrow, and welcome to another episode of the Yarrow podcast. It is Monday morning for me here in Vancouver. Actually, no, it's Monday afternoon, just ticked over 12. I hope you had a great weekend. I had a fairly slow weekend, just some time with my dogs, my fiance, some long walks, trips to the cafe, plus a bit of work. I like to do creative work on the weekends. Sometimes that's writing, sometimes it's admin work. Always something. I like to mix it up, but that's typically the sort of cadence I like with my life, a bit of everything. And for today's topic, I want to talk a little bit about my past when I wasn't living this suburban Vancouver life and I was a digital nomad, and offer you some of the pros and cons and tips and advice if you are considering becoming a nomad. Maybe you are a nomad already, but you're finding parts of it difficult. I just like to highlight what I did enjoy, but how I would do it differently. Even if you just want to travel, especially as an entrepreneur, you want to travel with your business. Can your business be run while you travel? And let's start there, in fact, because that is a key question. You obviously have to make money to travel. And even if you're not going to be a nomad, if you just want to go away and try it, let's take a month living in a different city and come back. Can you take your business with you? That's question number one. And a lot of that comes down to what business model you have and how well you've built systems and delegated tasks to other people. Now, some business models are very simple and elegant. For example, my education business, I was able to travel with almost from day one. In fact, all of my early businesses, although they were not necessarily huge, they certainly, as well, let's focus on the education business because that was the largest one. It did become a seven-figure revenue business. And for large parts of that, I was the center point of what made that business work. I was the content creator, I was the coach, I was the one creating education products. So without me, it didn't work. But everything I did was digital. So I was able to travel with that business, sit in cafes, create content, run a coaching call from my Airbnb, or back then there were VRBOs, there were no Airbnbs, and also, your hotel as well. So that's the kind of situation where the business model lends itself really well to travel. Now, if you have a business that's, constantly requiring you to show up on calls, attending meetings, if this is a situation where you just can't leave a computer, that makes traveling very uncomfortable. It means you have to basically stay home in a hotel, and that's not what you want while you're traveling. You don't want to feel this pressure to sort of get out there and see things, but also know that people require time with you. You need to be there to answer questions. It may not even be calls. You may just be needed to reply on Slack messages. And if you don't get back to those Slack messages in a certain amount of time, things start to fall apart. So I had a little bit of that experience. My business was very Slack orientated, and I had contractors overseas, and there were certain windows of time where I could get them to reply. So sometimes I would, for example, wake up, all the questions were there, or the output they were working on was there for me to review. And then I gave them answers, but they were asleep. So I wouldn't get another answer until later in the day. That's especially a case when you're living in Australia, which is where I grew up. So I was used to that already. But you may not be used to that. You may be used to living, 9 to 5 time in Europe or in North America. And that lines up well with whoever else you're working with. It could be your clients, it could be your team. So you do need to factor that in. I actually experienced the opposite effect because I went back to Australia and visited my family there. And I had never run my current business in Australia. It basically was a business that was born after I left Australia. And now I work with a team, mostly through Slack, but we still have meetings and I do sales calls occasionally too. When I'm in Australia, suddenly it doesn't line up very well. When I'm waking up, I get like this small window of time where I was getting like the last few hours of time with them. And the same thing would happen. I'd go to bed and I'd catch, the early morning of them. Maybe there were some windows where I could get stuff done, but it was very interruptive to my day as well, because it was often like late afternoon, dinner time. That's when the people just happen to be there to work. And if you ever worked with contractors where you don't have, a person who's completely working independently, they actually need you to do, maybe some back and forth with them. You get a window of time where they're working on your project and maybe they're doing it for the next hour, and they need you to kind of go back and forth with them a little bit. How do you like this? What about this? And if you're not available to go back and forth, or maybe you are, but you're doing some sightseeing, or you're having dinner and you've got your phone out and you're just writing these Slack messages back and forth in order to like give them the answers and keep the project moving forward. So I've definitely been in that situation. It's not like a deal breaker. You can certainly get things done, but it might be a little slower and it might be a little interruptive. But you have to factor that in. And this is where business model and communication methods and team, all of that's very relevant. So, experiment. Even just look at the time zone and see what it'd be like to operate your business if that's what your time zone is and how things might change. Maybe prepare. Like, one of the great things you can do is delegate more. And this is a great forcing function for you if you do want to travel, to actually start building a team and building some more processes. This is where I'm going to give a plug for my company, 50hours.com or inboxdone.com. Basically, it's executive assistants that can take over a lot of tasks for you. And this is an area where the tasks they take over are the things that allow you to travel. Because if you don't have to think about your inbox, if you don't have to think about protecting time in your calendar, if you don't have to think about missing something, if you just can know with comfort that these responsibilities, the sort of day-to-day operations, admin, communication, is someone else's responsibility, and they'll let you know the things you have to deal with, but it's not you only. It's someone else who's going to be looking after this. You're not going to forget something. You're going to not miss a reply. You're not going to miss an opportunity. You're not going to miss some sort of key contract that that is sitting in the inbox amongst all these emails. It's their job to do this and then give you the most important things. So that's a real important step for travel. Otherwise, it's all your responsibility, which can really impact the enjoyment you get from travel, because you'll always feel like, what am I missing? I need to go open my computer. And we've all seen that. The person who, can't join the morning at the beach because they have to answer emails, or they can't attend dinner at night because they have to go do all this work. So you don't want to be that person. You want to have that feeling of relaxation, because you can trust the people who are operating the day-to-day, of your business and even your life back home. So that's the starting point. I will point out a few other things before I wrap up this call with travel and running a business. Being a nomad does have some downside. I definitely found it difficult to make friendships. You have no, solid communities. Dating is difficult if you're moving around a lot. So you do spend a lot of time alone. For an introverted person, that can be fine. I found myself, not struggling with the idea of waking up and knowing that today I actually don't necessarily have to meet or talk to anyone in the real world. I can just happily go to cafes, walk around, explore bookshops, maybe explore historical sites, try different new foods, do some writing in a cafe, come home, have dinner, maybe do some exercise somewhere along the lines there as well. And that's the day. I may not have interacted with another human being besides paying for something at a cafe. And that was fine, but you might not enjoy that, especially if it starts to become day 3 of doing the same thing like that. You might start to go crazy. So picking places where you've got the potential to build a community, maybe you're just very extroverted and you're not going to have a problem with that. But in my case, it's good to pick places where even in advance, you can see groups, even events, things around, especially in my case, business. I would recommend this for you as well if you're entrepreneurial. Generally speaking, entrepreneurs like to hang out and make friends with other entrepreneurs. It's just the topic we talk about the most is business. And if we don't want to, feel like we're boring a person who doesn't care about business, or vice versa, we're just getting bored by them because they have, just no commonalities. Finding entrepreneur events is definitely a smart thing to do, and a criteria for which places to choose to visit. Sometimes that's not possible. I spent a lot of time just traveling through European cities, but that was intentional. I intended to do a lot of writing. I was on basically a train journey across Europe from Germany to London to go to a conference. I like that. I like having a destination and a purpose. So sometimes picking a conference or an event. I did the same thing with Asia. I had an experience I wanted to have with anime, Studio Ghibli in particular, that I had booked in my calendar. And I made this commitment to myself that I'm going to go to Hong Kong and I'm going to go to Japan and I'm going to see these places that I've wanted to see. And then I'm going to end the trip with this experience with Studio Ghibli. It was like a tourist event. So that was fun just to give me a reason to start the movement. So that might work for you as well. Honestly, I could talk a lot more about travel. Maybe I'll do a part two with some more tips. But since we're getting close to 10 minutes and it's also time for me to get back to work, I'm going to end this episode of the Arrow Podcast. And of course, if you do want to subscribe, you can find the Arrow Podcast on all the usual podcast channels. And also, if you're interested in just learning content marketing, getting on my newsletter, making sure you don't miss my content, you can go to insidegrowth.com/content and you'll find a free guide on how I'm doing content and the AI stack I'm currently using to help me get so much more done, which is a big part of being able to travel. If you have content marketing running, that's getting you customers so you can travel knowing that people will be discovering your content and your business will be operating. That is definitely a feeling of relief compared to, say, something you have to do manually all the time to get customers, which you will not be able to do if you're traveling. So content marketing is definitely one of those assets you should work on. So head to insidegrowth.com/content to get my free guide. All right, my name is Yarrow. I'll speak to you very soon. Bye-bye.